All right, it's finally time. We are going to start to really dig into doing research. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about tertiary sources, and we're going to look at how to find really good tertiary sources for historical research. I'm going to divide up this video into three main sections. In the first one, I'm going to talk mostly about sort of why tertiary sources, like what do we use them for? What's their purpose? In the second section, we're going to look at how to find good tertiary sources, and I'm going to kind of take you through some of my favorite tertiary source databases to use. And then in the third section, I'm going to try to address the kind of elephant in the room, which is, all right, what do we do with the internet? All right, let's get going. Okay, let's just start with what tertiary sources are, kind of remind ourselves what they are, and why are they so important. All right, you may remember this illustration from a previous video. This is my graphic to represent kind of what primary, secondary, and tertiary sources are. As a reminder, tertiary sources are studies of the past that base their study on the analyses of secondary sources. Tertiary sources tend to be broad overviews of topics. They don't usually have distinct arguments or interpretations. Instead, they kind of function simply as sources of general information. The most common forms of tertiary sources are encyclopedia articles, scholarly dictionary articles, and websites. So in learning how to find tertiary sources, what we're really learning is how to find encyclopedias and dictionaries and websites, though not so much on that last one. More on that later. Another blast from the past. This slide is also from a previous video, and I used it to explain what the function of primary, secondary, and tertiary sources are for historical research projects. You'll remember from that video that the function of tertiary sources is to provide background information, to help start the research process, and to supply leads to other secondary and primary sources. That's what we use tertiary sources for. Jenny Presnell, however, helps us understand a bit more clearly how tertiary sources can help us in our research. Presnell points out that the type of information that tertiary sources can give us include the following. Tertiary sources give us summary information, right? Information that help us understand our topics better. They also give us definitions to sort of key terms and terminology, again, kind of helping us understand our topic. But tertiary sources can also give us sort of associated or synonymous terms, other terms related to our topic that will sort of help us narrow our topic to an appropriate size and potentially find primary sources. Tertiary sources can also bring up names of individuals associated with events or associated with movements. Again, this is really important for us in going about the work of narrowing topics and finding primary sources on a topic. Similarly, tertiary sources give us dates and places. It helps us kind of orient events and people in certain places and times. And it really becomes very handy when we're looking for primary sources and have to sort of locate those primary sources by thinking about when they might have been created. Finally, tertiary sources give us bibliographies. They give us sources for further reading. That's how we find a lot of secondary sources. And they also give us biographical information so that we can understand a little bit about the people that we're going to talk about in our history papers. So good tertiary sources can do all of this for you. They're really helpful to consult, especially in the beginning stages of a research project. All right, great. Now we know a little bit about why we use tertiary sources. So now let's kind of turn the page and start to think about how to actually find them. And I'm going to show you a little bit about my two favorite tertiary source databases. All right, I'm going to give you my recommendations on how to find solid tertiary sources that will help with the process of gathering basic information, identifying good terms and definitions, names, dates, all the kind of things that we use for the purpose of narrowing our topics and helping us later on with primary source research. So the tool that I recommend for using for this purpose, right, for the purpose of general information and for topic narrowing is Credo Reference. Credo is a database of academic tertiary sources, including encyclopedias and dictionaries and all sorts of things. You have access to Credo through Baylor. I'll show you how to access it in just a second, but before I do that, let me explain why I like Credo. Credo includes only tertiary sources that are published by academics or academic presses. So this isn't just like a Google search, right? Credo provides references that are reliable academic sources. This is the kind of material that we want to use in general in our research projects. So what do you do with Credo? Well, search for your interests, however broad they may be. You'll generally find a lot of articles. The key to using Credo is really understanding that it is an interdisciplinary database, though. So it has encyclopedias from a wide range of fields and disciplines. Your job when using Credo is to focus on the tertiary sources that are clearly historical, right? Encyclopedias of world history or dictionaries of East Asian history or whatever, right? Try to avoid, if you can, the tertiary sources that are clearly connected to other fields. It's not because they're bad, they're totally fine, but this is just because encyclopedias attached to other fields generally provide the kind of information and resources that would be helpful for doing research in those other fields. You want as much information and as many references to historical topics and historical studies as possible. So searching history encyclopedias is a much more worthwhile thing for you to do. When you find a good article in Credo, take notes on a few things. Note, for example, the specific people and dates and places and events and other terms that are listed in the article. You're going to need these to narrow your topic and to use them as kind of keywords for searching for sources down the line. Also take notes on any sources that are referenced in the article. This might be in a bibliography at the end of the article, or it might be just kind of generally referenced throughout the middle of the article. In either case, these references can lead you to really good primary and secondary sources. Also note the main sections of the tertiary source article. Sometimes these articles are broken down into distinct sections, and those sections give us a little bit of a clue on how historians sort of approach the topic that you're looking at. This might be a great way to narrow your topic, to think about sort of one period of an event, or to look at one dynamic of a historical phenomenon. Finally, when you're finished reading the article, take a second and think, what wasn't there? This thought process might lead you to asking really good questions about your topic. Those questions might become the research questions that are the basis of your argument, the basis of your study. Ultimately, the goal of research, if you remember, is to get us to new information. So you can't just settle with whatever has already been written about the topic. You have to think about where the holes are, where the gaps are. And tertiary sources can sort of give you that. Okay, so let's start with Credo. And the way to get access to Credo is to start at the Baylor University Library's website. So to find Credo, Credo is a database. So first you have to click on Database and then just type in Credo. You'll see it's the only result, which makes it pretty easy to find. When you click here, it'll bring you to, after kind of logging in and everything, it'll bring you to the homepage for Credo. This is what the database homepage looks like. Again, because Credo is an interdisciplinary database, I tend to find it really helpful to just scroll down to history first and clicking there. That will allow you to browse certain topics, or if you want to just kind of search for whatever topic you're looking for, you can just go up to the search bar and search it yourself. So let's check out what you would do with Credo to kind of use it. I'll go to a kind of historical topic. How about we go to Thomas Paine? So if you click in on Thomas Paine, one of the things that Credo will give you is essentially links to lots of different tertiary sources with articles on Thomas Paine. This top one is from the Columbia Encyclopedia. It's a kind of general encyclopedia. And if you clicked at the read more spot, you get a little bit more information about who Thomas Paine was, when he was born, where he sort of went. You could pay attention to all the various dates that are included, right, that are important to his biography, and get to know a little bit about him and what he did throughout his life. But what I like to do with Credo is to then look at other tertiary sources to see what else is provided. And I usually look for tertiary sources that have like history in the name of it. So for example, this one, the Oxford Encyclopedia of American Military and Diplomatic History, or this one, the Reader's Guide to British History. So let's check out and see what the Reader's Guide to British History has for us. Okay, and this is really cool because this article starts first with a bibliography, and many of these works are great secondary sources that can sort of launch you in your secondary source research if you were focusing on Thomas Paine or something having to do with Thomas Paine. And then the article later on not only describes a little bit about Thomas Paine's life, but it also starts actually bringing in some of these secondary sources to talk about the historiography. So you can see how tertiary sources can be really helpful, right? They can start to provide you with not only basic information, names, dates, other things that are sort of relevant to whatever the topic is that you're looking at, but they can get you started on figuring out what the main primary and secondary sources are to study your topic. There's one other tertiary source that I highly recommend using. It's called the Oxford Bibliographies. This is a really different type of tertiary source. Instead of focusing on providing basic information and terms on a topic, Oxford Bibliographies, the articles in the Oxford Bibliographies are really focused on providing bibliographic information or references to other works of scholarship. Okay, why is this useful? Well, because this will give you a head start on figuring out the historiography on your topic. This is one of the best tools to get at a quick peek at what the major studies are on a certain historical topic, what the big questions are and how to find these things. Once again, you can get access to Oxford Bibliographies through Baylor. It's a subscription database, but Baylor has access, so I'll show you how to connect to it in just a moment. There are, however, two kind of tricks that I've found that you need to sort of employ when using Oxford Bibliographies. First, like Credo, Oxford Bibliographies is an interdisciplinary resource. That means that you're going to get entries that focus on different fields, different disciplines than history. These articles, again, are great, but just not as useful for history research papers as they might be for other types of research papers. They'll point you in the direction of scholarship in those other fields. So to use Oxford Bibliographies effectively, it's important that you look at the articles that really deal with historical literature on your topic. There are a few subjects listed in the Oxford Bibliographies website that sort of do this really well, and I've listed them here. They include everything from African American studies to African studies to some of the ones that actually have history in the title, like Atlantic history or military history. But many of these other regional studies are things that will get you to history articles pretty easily. The second trick is a little more complicated. You see, Oxford Bibliographies only has a limited amount of articles included in it. And chances are you will not find an article in Oxford Bibliographies on your specific kind of narrowed down research topic. That's because I've been pushing you to narrow your topic to a very, very narrow point, to a really, really specific point. And chances are they won't have an article on the specific person that you're going to focus on or the specific moment or event that you're looking at. So instead, the way to use Oxford Bibliographies is to think more broadly. Search for articles on topics that are related to your narrow research topic, but in a more broad or general way. For example, if you're researching, say, a particular military general's impact on World War II, you might not find an article on that general specifically, but you might find an Oxford Bibliography article on, say, World War II in the Mediterranean and Middle East. This is a broader topic, but it will give you a kind of sense of what the historiography is on that broader topic that you can then connect your specific research topic to. And this is actually good because ultimately what you're going to need to do in a research paper is tie your particular topic and your particular question, right, the narrowed in research topic and question that you have, to something that historians are talking about, a larger historiographical debate. So Oxford Bibliographies and research in this database is really important to give you a sense of what historiographical debates are out there, what you can connect to. Okay, let me give you another tour of a tertiary source, or really a database of tertiary sources that I really like, the Oxford Bibliographies. Again, to access Oxford Bibliographies, you have to start at the Baylor University Library's webpage. Since it's a database, we click on Database, and then you just type in Oxford Bibliographies and click Search. Now, the tricky thing here is that Oxford Bibliographies, right, like I mentioned before, it's an interdisciplinary resource, and it has many different sections that all deal with different disciplines, everything from linguistics to anthropology, education, ecology, music, all sorts of things. Some of these are a little more closely related to history. Some say history, like military history, and some are just kind of like tangentially related, like Chinese studies or, other interdisciplinary studies. One of the ones that I lean on a lot is the Atlantic history one, which includes the sort of histories of Europe, North America, South America, and Africa. So it hits a lot of different kind of dimensions of history, a lot of different areas of study. And if you click here on the Atlantic History Oxford Bibliographies, it'll send you to the Oxford Bibliographies webpage, and specifically the Atlantic History section of it. If you wanted to go to a different section, you could just click here on the Browse by Subject button, and it'll get you to one of the other sections. So this is where you type in the search bar kind of what your topic is. So So for example, if we wanted to figure out if there's anything on Thomas Paine, we might just type in Paine and see, and look at that. There's an article by Harry T. Dickinson on Thomas Paine specifically in the Atlantic History Oxford Bibliography. So that's sort of a perfect example. That's the best case scenario. You have an entry, an article on the exact topic that you kind of are looking at. But let's pretend that there wasn't one on Thomas Paine. What are some other things that we could sort of look for with Oxford Bibliographies to get a start on researching the historiography that we might want to engage in? Well, Thomas Paine was really influential not only in the kind of American Revolution, but also in the French Revolution. So what if we went with something more like, I don't know, the Age of Revolutions? And check that out, right? There is an article on the Age of Atlantic Revolutions. If you click into this, you get a wonderful bibliographic article that not only gives a little introduction about what the Age of Atlantic Revolutions was, but also really the main thing that Oxford Bibliographies gives you is a lead on kind of historiography, on major secondary sources on that topic, and a little bit about what they are and how they kind of relate, what the historiographical discussions are and how individual historians have sort of influenced them. Important things to note in any entry in Oxford Bibliographies is this little box right here. This box is really great because it'll give you the various subsections of the article. So if you wanted to just get the sort of historiography on the United States, Britain, and Ireland, you could click there. If you wanted just the historiography on France, you could click there, and it will kind of launch you down to the section of the article that deals with that. And this is what most sections look like, right? It'll give you a little bit of an introductory paragraph that will tell you a little bit about that specific subsection of the larger article, but it'll also start to give you references to specific works that are important in the historiography of that subject. This is one of the best places to kind of launch secondary source research. You can get a bunch of different really, really good, really important and influential academic secondary sources from the Oxford Bibliographies articles. Okay, last thing we have to talk about is Wikipedia. Okay, we have to do it. We have to end by talking a little bit about the internet. So I know what you're thinking. You are thinking, why go through all the trouble of using these kind of fancy subscription databases? Why not just Google it, right? After all, isn't Wikipedia the internet's free encyclopedia? Well, let me start by saying that I'm not a Wikipedia hater. Wikipedia is great. And it's gotten a lot better than what it used to be in the very beginning of its existence, all the way in the early 2000s. I can occasionally find good references to scholarly materials through Wikipedia articles. I've checked basic facts through Wikipedia before, too. That said, Wikipedia is kind of the less preferential option for tertiary research for a few reasons. First, of course, it's a collaborative project, and that means that anyone can hypothetically edit it. And while the editors of the website have done quite a bit in recent years to sort of provide editorial oversight, the fact remains that lots of Wikipedia articles are overly politicized, sometimes they're misleading, and oftentimes they're kind of myopic in perspective. Frankly, they're just written from a different perspective than academic tertiary sources are. They're sources with more of a, I might call it a sort of public or popular history spin than an academic one. What that means is that the kind of information in Wikipedia articles and the kinds of sources that are referenced in them are not necessarily the types of things that you'll find most valuable for a sort of academic research project. Wikipedia articles, for example, won't necessarily point you in the direction of historiography. They're just not really designed to do that. And you are ultimately producing a piece of professional historical scholarship. So we have to kind of go to the places where that type of scholarship is done, right? Where that's modeled and where the resources for that type of scholarship exist. So to get the type of things that we want out of a tertiary source, it's best to rely upon tertiary sources designed to give us that stuff, designed to give us help with professional academic history research, not just tertiary sources designed to provide basic or entertaining information. Okay, finally, I want to end this video with a few tips. First, use tertiary sources to help you get a narrow historical topic. Again, the narrower, the better for most historical research projects. Start small. It's always easier to broaden your topic than it is to narrow it down the line. So start narrow first and use tertiary sources to get you there. Second, use tertiary sources to help you get a worthwhile and narrow research question. Tertiary sources will tell you what's been done on a topic. Reading between the lines on them will give you a sense of what hasn't been done. That's where you should be thinking about going in terms of your own research. Finally, use tertiary sources to identify potential historiographical debates that you can connect your study to. These won't necessarily be debates about your specific research topic. In fact, they're most likely not going to be. But instead, they'll be debates about related or associated topics to which your particular topic and study will contribute. So use tertiary sources to get a quick sense of what those debates are so that you'll know sort of how to guide your secondary source research when you get to that. And get to it you shall. Once you get these things, it's time to turn to secondary and primary source research. We'll talk about that process, however, in a later video. So there you go. That's pretty much the whole lesson. The important thing kind of to remember here is that tertiary sources are really, really useful and important at this beginning stage of research. As you go throughout the research process, though, we're going to really focus most of our time on what to do with secondary and primary sources. Another thing I want to leave you with is that though I talked a lot about Credo and about the Oxford bibliographies, those aren't the only tertiary sources out there. There are plenty of great tertiary sources that you can use. In fact, there are lots of just print versions of tertiary sources that are listed in various guides and historiographical books. In general, what you want out of a tertiary source is just help with the process of conceptualization. If you remember our research process from a previous video, that work of conceptualization, the first stage of the research process, is really where tertiary sources come in handy the most. So find good tertiary sources to help you think through what your topic is, how you can narrow it, how you can devise good search strategies for more primary sources and other secondary sources, how you can really get going with the whole research process. All right, so that's it. See you in class.